The clerk called it the resolution of sovereign correction, which was the Assembly's way of saying expulsion without using a word that sounded final. I had been in that chamber for 11 days when they read it. 11 days of procedural motions, of translation delays that weren't delays, of caucus members filing in and out of the upper tiers with the slow, unhurried confidence of people who had already made up their minds and were only here to watch the paperwork catch up. Ambassador Uriel Doran sat to my left, her hands flat on the table. She had not moved them in 2 hours. I had learned, in the 4 years I served as her attaché, that when her hands were flat like that, not folded, not clasped, just flat, she had already finished deciding something and was simply waiting for the room to finish deciding it too. I watched the Sovereign Caucus read the resolution aloud. There were 9 of them arrayed in the crescent above us, the VEF delegation, the Sarathai bloc, the 3 conclave seats held by the Aradi spine worlds, and the 4 rotating chairs currently occupied by species whose names I could pronounce but whose motivations had always been, at bottom, arithmetic. They wanted our transit lane fees, our resource licensing contracts, our docking agreements at Threshold Station. They wanted all of it reassigned to the compliant fringe worlds that had been quietly lobbying for 2 decades to absorb our trade routes. The resolution of sovereign correction was the mechanism. It stripped Earth and all associated compact worlds of Assembly membership, transit rights, resource access, and representation. It was, in their framing, a corrective measure. In plain terms, it was a padlock on a door they assumed we needed. The presiding VEF delegate, First Voice Aaron Sohol, read each clause with the measured cadence of someone who had rehearsed the weight of the moment. His neck frills were partially extended, not full display, which would have been aggression, but the quarter extension that in VEF social language meant quiet satisfaction. I had sat across tables from enough VEF to know the difference. This was not ceremony to him. This was pleasure. The vote proceeded tier by tier. The Sarathai bloc, unanimous. The Aradi seats, unanimous. The rotating chairs, one after another, each delegate pressing their confirmation sigil into the light panel at their station. The chamber's ambient hum dropped a half register with each vote, the way a room's air changes when a door is being shut, slowly, by many hands at once. Ambassador Doran let them reach the 4th rotating chair. Then she stood up. She did not push back her chair. She did not gather her papers. She simply rose, smoothly, and without a word or a glance at the Sovereign Caucus or the assembled gallery, she walked to the chamber's floor exit at a pace that was neither hurried nor slow. It was the pace of someone leaving a meeting that had already concluded to their satisfaction. I stood and followed her. So did the 3 other members of our delegation, Trade Liaison Holst, Deputy Compact Representative Myra Vance, and the young signals officer whose name I will not put in writing here, because he asked me not to. We filed out in the order we had sat, in silence, while the vote continued behind us. I heard the 5th rotating chair confirm. Then the 6th. The doors sealed behind us. In the corridor outside, Ambassador Doran said nothing for a long moment. The corridor was empty. The Assembly complex kept this level clear during major votes, a courtesy, or a custom, I had never fully determined which. The light here was the flat, cold blue that the Assembly's Aradi architects preferred, and it made everyone look like they had just received bad news. Doran, standing in it, looked like she was doing arithmetic. Well, said Holst, eventually. Yes, said Doran. That was the whole conversation. We were on a transit shuttle to the outer dock 40 minutes later. I remember watching the Assembly's primary complex recede through the shuttle's rear viewing panel, that vast, layered structure of pale stone and copper green alloy that the Assembly had built 300 years ago to project the image of permanence, and thinking that it did look permanent. The problem with permanent-looking things is that they make you forget to check what's on the other side of them. The dispatches started reaching me 3 weeks after we returned to Earth. Not official communications. The Assembly had, as promised, severed our access to the interstellar relay network within their jurisdiction, but the traffic from beyond the Brennan threshold routed through compact world relays that the Assembly didn't administer because the Assembly didn't know they were there. The first one was from Administrator Pell, Station Director at what our internal navigation charts designated Outpost Vantage 7, which had no official designation in Assembly records because the Assembly had never catalogued it. The message was brief. Construction on the 2nd ring was complete. The garrison had transferred. When did we want to hold the naming ceremony? I took it to Ambassador Doran in her office in the Trade Compact building on the Reykjavik waterfront. She read it once, set it down, and looked out the window at the water. They voted in the 4th hour, she said. We broke ground on Vantage 7's 2nd ring in the 3rd. I had been doing the math since the dispatch arrived. The Assembly's enforcement window closes at 6 weeks. For them to re-establish any presence past the Brennan threshold, they'd need to petition the Drift Council for transit authorization, and the Drift Council is compact aligned, Doran said. Yes. She picked up the dispatch again. Pull up the full development log. All posts past the threshold, current status, garrison complements, supply chain routes. I already had it on my tablet. I had been carrying it for days, waiting to be asked. I set it in front of her. She read it for a long time. The room was quiet. Outside the window, a grey sea moved the way grey seas do, with total indifference to everything on its shore. When she looked up, I recognized the expression. I had seen it once before, in a conference room on Threshold Station 4 years earlier, when a Sarathai trade bloc representative had informed her, with visible satisfaction, that Earth's resource licensing bids would be reviewed at the end of the Assembly's standard processing cycle, which ran 22 months. Doran had nodded, thanked him, and on the transit home had quietly authorized the acceleration of the Compact World licensing agreements that bypassed Assembly review entirely. By the time the Sarathai block's processing cycle completed, we had not needed the licenses. The expression was not triumph. It was not relief. It was the look of someone confirming an answer they already knew and finding it correctly set. How many installations, she asked, are past the threshold and currently outside Assembly jurisdictional reach? I told her. The silence that followed was not mine to fill. The Assembly sent its first formal communication 8 weeks after the expulsion vote. It arrived not through diplomatic channels, those had been severed for the resolution of sovereign correction, but through the Drift Council's neutral relay, addressed to the Earth Compact Trade Office, which was technically all that remained of our official presence in any framework the Assembly recognized. The communication was from First Voice Aaron Sohol's office. It did not come from Sohol directly. That, I understood later, would have required him to acknowledge that the situation warranted his personal attention, which he was not yet prepared to do. It came from a deputy correspondence clerk, which in Veth bureaucratic hierarchy placed it roughly at the level of an inquiry, not a demand. The substance of it was this. Certain relay traffic had been detected in the systems beyond the Brennan threshold that suggested unauthorized infrastructure. The Assembly wished to understand the nature of this traffic. Would the Earth Compact Trade Office care to clarify? Doran drafted the response herself. It was 4 sentences. The Earth Compact Trade Office acknowledged receipt of the communication. The infrastructure in question was located beyond the boundaries of Assembly jurisdictional space, in accordance with Article 14 of the Brennan Threshold Survey Accords, which predated Assembly jurisdiction in that region by 60 years. The Compact Trade Office noted that it was no longer a member body of the Assembly, and therefore received Assembly inquiries as a courtesy only. We wished the First Voice's office continued good health. The response was transmitted on a Thursday. By the following Tuesday, 3 more dispatches had arrived from beyond the threshold. The garrison at Vantage 9 had completed its shakedown exercise. The relay node at Waypoint Calder was fully operational. And a delegation from the Saladi Free Ports, a species the Assembly had been courting for 30 years and failing to bring into formal membership, had arrived at Compactway Station Doral to discuss a bilateral transit agreement. I delivered all 3 dispatches to Doran. She read them in order, with the same unhurried care she brought to everything, and then she set them on her desk and was quiet for a moment. There was a 4th item I had not yet handed her. A relay intercept from a Compact intelligence officer based at Threshold Station, still technically Assembly jurisdiction, though our people there were winding down the last of the trade officer's physical presence. The intercept was a summary of internal Assembly communications, shared through channels I was not supposed to know existed. The summary was short. The Sovereign Caucus had, in closed session, asked the Assembly Survey Directorate to produce a map of infrastructure beyond the Brennan threshold. The Survey Directorate had replied that no such map existed in Assembly archives. The caucus had asked why not. The Directorate had explained that the Brennan threshold region had been classified as unincorporated fringe space, of no significant resource or strategic value, and had not been formally surveyed in 60 years. I set that one on the desk last. Doran read it. Set it down with the others. They thought the dark was empty, she said. It wasn't a question. They thought the dark was empty, I agreed. The second communication from the Assembly came 6 weeks after that. This time it was addressed directly to Ambassador Doran by name and title, which was, in itself, a concession, since the resolution of sovereign correction had formally stripped her of any Assembly-recognized diplomatic standing. Addressing her by her title meant they had already quietly decided the resolution said something less than what they had meant it to say. The communication asked, with careful circumspection, whether the Earth Compact, not the Earth Compact Trade Office, but the Compact, would be interested in a consultative dialogue regarding transit lane arrangements in the outer fringe. Doran wrote her response in about 90 seconds. She sent it before I had finished reading the original. I read her reply afterward. It was 2 sentences. The Earth Compact would be pleased to receive a full Assembly delegation for consultative dialogue at Compact Way Station Doral at the Assembly's earliest convenience. The Compact's standard guest transit arrangements would apply. Way Station Doral, I should note, sat 40 light minutes past the Brennan threshold. To reach it, the Assembly delegation would travel through space they did not administer, using relay nodes they did not own, docking at a station that bore no Assembly registration, to sit across a table from a representative body they had formally expelled 2 months earlier. They came anyway. I was there for the opening session. Doran led our side. The Assembly sent a caucus liaison, not a first voice, not a senior delegate, but a liaison, which in their hierarchy sat below full diplomatic rank. A message in itself. They weren't ready to call it a negotiation. We didn't correct them. The liaison, a Sarathai named Velith Auric, composed and careful and clearly uncomfortable with the geometry of the room, with the way our people moved through the station without hesitation while his staff kept checking sightlines, opened with a prepared statement about the mutual benefits of cooperative transit management. Doran waited until he finished. Then she placed a document on the table. It was a single page. Our navigation survey of the outer fringe, updated to current installations. 41 compact waypoints, 19 garrison posts, 7 operational relay hubs, and the Salati bilateral framework, initialed 2 weeks prior. All of it passed the threshold. None of it on any Assembly chart. Auric looked at it for a long time. Beside him, his deputy leaned in, and I watched her translate the grid notation quietly, and I watched her expression change as she understood what she was reading. I have thought about that moment many times since. The deputy's face, not Auric's, who was too disciplined, but hers, the way understanding moved across it. First the numbers, then the dates, then the realization that the dates meant all of this had existed before the vote. Some of it had existed before the Assembly had even convened the preliminary hearings. They had debated, at length, the terms of casting us into a darkness they had never looked at. We had been building inside it for 11 years. The session was brief. There was not much to say. Doran said very little of it. The rest was arithmetic, and the arithmetic was not difficult. Auric asked, eventually, what the Compact's terms would be for a return to consultative status within the Assembly framework. Doran considered this. We don't need the framework, she said, but we are willing to talk about what the framework needs. That was all she said. She did not elaborate. She did not lean forward or let her voice harden or soften. She let the sentence sit there like a document on a table, which was exactly what it was. Auric nodded, very slowly, and made note. I walked out of that session behind Ambassador Doran into the wide, clean corridor of Way Station Doral, with its high ceilings and its warm running lights and the faint hum of the station's own gravity system, and I thought about the resolution of sovereign correction, and the 3rd hour of the vote, and the way Doran's hands had lain flat on the table through all of it. They had opened a door they were certain we needed to pass through to survive. We had spent 11 years building the road on the other side.